Hello everyone, it's Wizaldo or Wesley here, and today I'm going to be running through some tips that I am using myself, as well as recommend for others, for improving at the One Piece card game. I split up this video into 3 sections, and the 3 sections are based on who the tips are for. The first group is for new players who know the general rules and how to play the game, but probably don't know some of the more technical things that a lot of people who play at locals use. These people are people who mainly play with their friends and don't really go to locals, or might go to locals but play very casually. The second group is players who know the general strategy of the game. They know some of the more technical things. They go to locals, they can 2-2 or better at locals pretty consistently, and they consider themselves pretty competitive. The third group is players that are experienced at a competitive level. These are players that are going to regionals or higher. They may not be topping at regionals, but their goal is to get there. These are the tips that I myself am implementing in my day-to-day. I'll be using my Yamato deck that qualified me for nationals as an example throughout this video. Here's the deck list for it. It's not super important. I do have a video out highlighting it if you want to go watch it. It qualified me for nationals again. So go check that out if you're really interested. So Novice Players. This is just a label that I'm using. Novice. It doesn't actually have any weight to it, so don't take it personally if you fall into this group. This part is for players who already know the rules of the game, but may be lacking in areas that would fall under fundamentals. Players may be used to just playing with friends and may not have been to an actual store tournament before, or they just might not be performing at store tournaments to the point that you want to. So how to swing. This is a very important concept and one of the first ones that I learned. It is attacking 2k over the opponent's power. This is important for taking life, for removing characters from the field, and it is a concept that revolves around countering. Each card in the opponent's hand is about 1k counter. It's just under that actually in your typical deck, and the way that this is calculated is by taking the total amount of counter in a deck and dividing it by 50, which is the max number of cards in the deck and the standard number of cards in the deck. This is an important concept for ending game and getting as much counter out of the opponent's hand as possible. This concept goes the other way too. You can be educated in how you are countering based on this concept as well. It's where the magic number being 7k comes from. This saying was created before a lot of 6k leaders came out, so the actual magic number is 2000 power over whatever you're swinging into. Knowing your deck's game plan. I think this is what a lot of people don't realize is important. Knowing what all your cards do in your deck, and knowing what characters end the game, which characters protect you, and how your game plan actually comes together is vital for winning. Knowing what events you use for when. For example, Gum Gum Giant is a event that gives 4k counter, costs 1, requires you to put 2 Don back into your Don deck, and pitch a card, then draw 2 cards. It is a great counter event that also cycles your hand. Knowing that's why the card is there will elevate your gameplay to another level. Knowing what type of deck you're playing is also very important. Control, aggro, midrange, or tempo, those are the 4 big types of decks, I think, and maybe your deck is a combination of the 2 or 3 of those. For example, my Yamato deck is a mid-range aggro deck. Knowing that, I can then formulate a plan. Knowing what your leader's colors lean towards. This is kind of a confusing concept because a lot of leaders don't actually do this. For example, Yamato's a green leader, but they're not about control as much as they are about doing stuff with life, taking 2 life out of hand. And all of these concepts, knowing what your deck's game plan is, will also affect how you mulligan and what a good starting hand is. When to go for life and when to go for board. This is part of the previous concept of knowing what type of deck you're playing, and this also expands into what type of deck your opponent is playing. For example, if you're playing against an aggro deck, you want to swing at their board because that requires them to dump their hand to keep their board strong, or you get to clear their board and they don't get to be as aggro as they were before. When to go for life versus board also is influenced by whether you're behind or ahead. Generally, if you are behind, you want to be swinging at their board. And if you need to play safe, you want to be swinging at their board. You don't want to give your opponent cards out of their life, but that's a little bit more of an advanced topic that I'll get into later in the video. Knowing if you gain anything from swinging at their life versus board. If you know your opponent is going to defend a swing at their life, but you also know that they're going to let you take away some of the characters on their board. You swing at their board. And understanding the board state. This is a high level concept as well, but I just want to touch on it here. Is your opponent on the defense or offense? If they're on the defense, you want to play offensively. But if they're on the offense, you want to play defensively. It's a very high level way of looking at it. One of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give new players is to play more. To find a local tournament near you if you haven't been to them yet. Tell people you're new. Talk to people. Veteran players love to talk about the game is one thing that I've noticed, especially with new players. So that is a great way to both make friends and get better at the game. Try out the simulator. The simulator is a great resource. It's a little bit difficult to understand sometimes and get into, but once you actually adjust to it, it's a great way to play. And if you can't do local tournaments, a great resource is finding webcam or simulator tournaments. So the next level is intermediate players. These are players who will go to locals, who are confident with their decks, they know what their decks do, they know the concepts that their decks are implementing, and stuff like that. This is a bit of a confusing concept, but tempo. It is very important, and it is a tell on the current state of the game. Tempo can be calculated by adding up how many swingable bodies, how many cards in hand, and how many cards are in life. So in the example photo I have below, the opponent has 2 cards in hand and 2 cards in life. Then combine that with the 5 swingable bodies, which 2 are blockers. I think they should be included because they can swing for game. You can adapt if you include them or not based on what point the game is in. So they have 5 swingable bodies, which gives them a total of 9 tempo. Contrast this with the player who has 1 swingable body, 3 life, and 2 cards. That is 6 tempo. This can be a tell on if you need to counter, if you need to swing at board, and stuff like that. Generally, the player who has a higher tempo is ahead. Keeping tempo high means countering smartly. That means countering when it makes sense. I don't think smartly is actually a word, but I'm going to use it to describe this. This is why a lot of people say, how many cards in hand before swinging at certain things. The next concept is taxing. Taxing is punishing your opponent when they play well, and sometimes when they play bad, but that's just punishing, so I didn't put it as part of this. For example, if your opponent takes a life and has a ton of cards in hand, you play a pudding. That way you just got rid of the card that they gained from life, offsetting their tempo. Different decks can tax in different ways. For example, Robin can tax opponents by swinging Banish at their life, and this is done because the opponent may counter out of smaller swings from characters, and then you swing a big swing into the life and they have to take it. That way they don't gain any tempo or don't go tempo neutral from their life. Another thing that's a good example is double attack. Your opponent may be countering pretty heavily out of double attack because they don't want to go low on life early, so they'll counter a ton out of that double attack. Life as a resource. Taking life isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it means you get an extra card in hand. If you're a yellow player, sometimes you can get triggers, and those triggers may even be part of your game plan. Sometimes you may have to expend more resources protecting your life for a specific swing than you will have to for later swings. For example, if your opponent's swinging 10k at you, but you'll remove the 10k next turn, it makes more sense to take the 10k swing and use the 6k counter that you would use to get out of that 10k swing for future smaller swings. This can all change if you're in a deck's danger zone. This is when you want to be countering more often because your opponent may be threatening to set up lethal. The danger zone on an L is 0 life, but the danger zone on another deck, like Rayleigh, is 2 life. It's just because different decks have different danger zones, and knowing that danger zone can determine how you use your life as a resource. Knowing your meta matchups. Knowing how your deck plays into the meta is very important, and beyond just knowing if your deck beats or loses to a certain deck. You also want to know why and how your deck beats that deck. This is because you can't beat a deck if you don't know actually how to beat it. Sure, you might get lucky and just play correctly, but knowing how to play correctly brings you to a whole nother level of skill. And this influences what cards you search, how you're searching, and the best way to build up this skill is to play other decks. An example that I'm currently implementing to know my meta matchups is playing other decks. I do this all the time. I'm playing Sakazuki a ton right now, and it is for more than just learning the matchup, but knowing what Sakazuki does, I can know how to play against him. Knowing your lines for different matchups. A line is a goal. That's what I'm calling it. It is a sequence or order you have to use your cards that achieves a goal. These can be different for certain matchups, and knowing these lines for those matchups can determine who wins and who loses. An example of a line in Yamato would be playing an Izo, giving your leader Banish, swinging at your opponent's life, say they counter out of it. Then you lose your Banish at the end of the turn, so instead of just losing the Banish, you play a Momonosuke, put the Izo into your life using the 5-cost Momonosuke effect, and then taking a swing at your leader, so you can Izo again next turn. This is a really good line into aggro because it heals you and gives you a blocker. So knowing that it's good into aggro, I prioritize getting that line. High-level players. These are players that are consistently going to regionals. They might not be topping at regionals. They might be doing pretty good though. And this is the level that I am trying to get to the top end of right now. I'd say I am between a intermediate and a high level player. That might be kind of confusing because I did get to nationals, but I do think some luck was in my win that got me to nationals, as well as I just want to be a better player. Tracking your opponent's hand is a concept that might seem pretty intermediate, but part of the concept is also a pretty high level concept that I include in here. So one of the more intermediate levels is searchers. Your opponent has to reveal what they get off of a searcher, and this lets you know that they have that card in hand. So keeping track of the cards that they search is one way to calculate how much counter they have in hand, what lines your opponent is going for, what your opponent might be able to remove, stuff like that. Countering also tells you what your opponent has in hand. For example, if my opponent counters with an Usohachi, I can assume that they don't have much other counter in hand because Usohachi is one of the best 2Ks in the game, and the opponent would much rather use other things to counter. Checking their trash is also a great way to know what is in their hand. Say your opponent has played 5 2Ks, and you know that their deck, on average, runs 9. You know that your opponent probably has no more than 4 or 5 more 2Ks in their deck, and might have only a few of those in their hand. You can use this to anticipate certain things and kind of guess how you should be playing. Reading your opponent. Now this is kind of metagamey and cringe, but One Piece card game, like a lot of other card games, your opponent may have tells. And while playing in person, it's pretty easy to pick up on those tells. You can see where your opponent's looking, and if they're calculating something, you may be able to get a general idea of what they're calculating. If your opponent puts their Don in separate piles to figure out things, you can figure out what they're going to play, and if they don't do that thing, you might be able to figure out what's in their hand. For example, if I just played a 9-cost threat against the Sakazuki, if my opponent puts 4 Don in a pile and has a 3-cost Tina in trash, I can assume that they have a 4-cost Rebecca in their hand. Then if they are doing the math in their head to try and remove my 9-cost, if the opponent does not, I can assume that the opponent does not have enough resources in hand to remove the 9-cost. So I can play as if they have enough removal in hand to remove an 8 or 7-cost. Knowing what your opponent wants to do, knowing how your opponent's deck plays, and thinking from their point of view on how they would want to beat you is a great way to figure out how you want to play into your opponent. This is another kind of metagamey thing, but it is important to think about. You want to think about how your opponent's deck would want to beat yours, and what kind of cards your opponent wants to see. And then you can take all of this and think about how you want to play against yourself, and think about how you want to thwart your opponent with all of this information. A great example of this is Nami. Nami has a bunch of 4K and 2K counter events. If you're playing a deck that does not scale well into the late game, you want to play as aggro as possible, swinging so that your opponent would have to use more than just one event. Game sense. The best players have a well-developed game sense, and it makes certain things that are in this list second nature to them. And unfortunately, this can only be gained by playing or watching people play. It is a experience-based skill. Fortunately, I think there are ways to develop this a little faster, and it is by playing specific decks. For example, Sakazuki is a great way to learn how to know what your opponent's threats are, and Purple Katakuri is a great deck for tracking hand. This is because Purple Katakuri looks at the top card of your opponent's deck, and eventually they're going to draw that card, and you'll be able to track their hand a little better. I'm planning to do a video on this Purple Katakuri where I try to do this, and feel free to check out it in the future. Subscribe if you want to see it. Alright, global level players. These are the players who are better than me. These are the players who I look up to, who I want to be. So how can they improve at the game? I don't know. If you are a global level player and you do know, let me know. Some things I see people do are coaching. Some advice I have is to avoid burnout. Maybe try metagaming, use the opponent's skill against them. And one of the most important things I have for all players who want to get to the global level is to manage their tilt. I tilt just like everyone else. For example, yesterday at locals, I got puddinged while I had 10 cards in hand, and that tilted me, and I just played bad and lost the game. Avoid doing that. Anyways, that brings us to the end of the tips. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to see more, leave a comment, leave a recommendation. If you want to tell me how much this video sucked, leave a comment, let me know, give me some feedback. If you enjoy this kind of content and you want to see me improve and eventually go to nationals, subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will hopefully see you in the next one.